would you now join me in reading the collect? Keep us, O Lord, from pettiness. Let us be large in thought, in word, in deed. Let us be done with fault-finding and leave off self-seeking. May we put away all pretense and meet with others face to face, without self-pity and without prejudice. May we never be hasty in judgment and always generous. Let us take time for all things. Make us grow calm, serene, gentle. Teach us to put into action our better impulses, straightforward and unafraid. Grant that we may realize it is the little things that create differences, that in the big things of life we are as one. And may we strive to touch and to know the great common human heart of us all. And, O Lord God, let us forget not to be kind. Francis, would you like to introduce our speaker for the day?
Yeah, gotta get the glasses out. Sometimes to, is this on? Hello? Hello? Yeah, there I go. You know, sometimes when you are presenting a hometown person to people who have known them for a long, long time, as I have known our speaker, I am, it's always a privilege. And as chairman of the Legislative Committee, it's always interesting in what is going on up there. And so Gippy, or Howard, serves on a lot of committees which are of interest to us as Franklin Countyans and the interest of the state. He has what is called interim committee assignments, that is, the committees that meet between the regular sessions. And he's on economic development and tourism, which is important to us. Of course, education, Kentucky Long-Term Policy Research Center, that is most, as even though I believe most of us are out of school by now, that we do have an interest in our children and grandchildren's and our friends' children. We have interest in their education. Of course, senior citizens, he's, of course, interested in us. Military affairs and public safety. Well, of course, even today, I guess some of you saw where there was a big plane crash in New York, and they were investigating it and closed down all of the airports and emptied the United Nations building, and they said it was precautionary, stopped all the subways from running. So that's public safety now, and military affairs are quite prominent in the news. He's been in the House since 1995, representing Franklin County, and he himself is an educator. He holds a degree from Baptist Cumberland College, Georgetown College, and the University of Kentucky, and Eastern Kentucky University, and also in the United States Air Force, and currently with the American Legion. So that'll give you his background, even though most of you probably known him all your life. So I present to you Representative Gippy Graham. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Francis, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you again. I think this is the third or fourth occasion that I've been with you. Our first occasion was back in 1975, which many of you don't remember that, I'm sure, but I just started working with state government and working in the Department of Education, and I was the state director of what was called community education, a concept that we were trying to get underway. And this was the first club or organization or group that I was invited to speak with and talk about that concept. I'm pleased to report to you that today, since 1975, 26 years later, we now have a full-time community education director or facilitator in 85 of our 120 counties, implementing this lifelong learning, which is a part of all the things that we now is a good catchword. But I am pleased to be with you, and today has been a great day. I was down at the courthouse earlier at 11 o'clock for the Veterans Day program. Some of you were there, and it was very inspirational. Just as a comment, this is being filmed to be shown throughout our county, and I want to commend the Frankfort City School System. We had their students there. We had the largest crowd there today for this program than any that I've witnessed in the years I've been going. And so it's a great thing. And the students performed, they sang. It was just a good patriotic day, and I left there uplifted, and I'm sure those of you that attended did also. I'm also pleased to have this opportunity to come and report to my constituents. They claim to the fact that I'm really a grassroots person, and I try to get out to the community. This is a great opportunity. I try to have community forums in the springtime, and then in the fall, and then I have them every Saturday morning when we're in session. But sometimes, you don't get good followings. Sometimes you may have one person, 10, sometimes 15, you don't know. So this is a great opportunity for me, and I'm grateful for it. I want to fulfill my assignment. Frances called me. You know Frances, whatever Frances wants, Frances gets. So she said, Jeffrey, I want you to come down and talk about some things about the general upcoming session. So, and she told me I'd have about 20 minutes or something of this nature, and I will try to stay within that. And the way I'm going to approach this, I think as we go into this session, there's at least 4 things that I think that are factors that will be affecting the dynamics of this session that we go in January. And one at the very beginning, a lot of information about this, is the budget shortfall. See, the budget shortfall, people here in Franklin County around or close to state government are more in tune to it than people in other parts of the state. I lay claim to the fact that I got the most learned constituents in all of the state, and sometimes I stand in awe of the people that I'm trying to address right now. See, I see June Taylor sitting here. June, gosh, she could probably make this presentation better than I could. And so all the experience she's had in state government and all. But I have so many constituents who are wise and have understanding, and sometimes have greater insights. But I use that as a really advantage, I think, if I can get them to talk with me. But the budget, we all know here in Franklin County that the budget is a key thing. You follow the money flow, you see where the priorities lie. So we're starting off now, this session, with over a $500 million deficit. Now that's the beginning. You may also know that we have a consensus forecasting group of economists that periodically look at projections about how our economy is going to be. And then they make these projections that come together, not where it used to be. The governor's office would have one projection, perhaps in the legislature a different one. But now it's a consensus. And the last meeting they had that they gave us the information on was in October. And at that time, we were told that now a little over a $500 million shortfall going into the session. And this budget this year was built upon anticipation of growth of something close to 5%. But that the growth from here on out to the end of this fiscal year, which would be next June 30th, would be 0.9%. So this group's going to come together again in December prior to going into session and make another forecast. So we look at the budget going in. And so we know that the budget's going to be tight. We're talking about maybe just trying to have a continuation budget. And so some of the things I say today and some of the topics that I will mention, please understand that we're saying that there's interest in doing certain things, but it's going to come down to how much money is going to be there and what's going to be the priorities, and that's very important. So that's one important factor that affects this session. A second very important factor that's going to, I think, have great effect on the dynamics is the redistricting of our state. Now, there may be, prior to us going into session in January, a special session, I saw that last week, that there may be some talk about it, whereas a month ago I would have thought it would not have a chance of having a special session prior to going into session. So whether we do or we do not, the redistricting is a very, very important thing. Now, I want to just comment a little bit about that, and if you already know it, please forgive me, but maybe some people listening that do not understand what we mean when we talk about the redistricting. We have 100 representatives in the House, and we have 38 senators. Well, you know, every 10 years we got to redistrict according to the census. At the present time, we were operating on the 1990 census, which had Kentucky with a population of around 3.6 million, just a little over 3.6 million, which means that every representative is supposed to, right now, be representing somewhere around 36,000 people. The courts say you can be 5% below that or 5% above that. Now, as a result of the 2000 census, our population of Kentucky is just a little over 4 million. So now each of the members of the House was supposed to be representing 40,418. That's the ideal district. Now, with being 5% below or 5% above, it means that each House member now would be able to be represented somewhere between 38,400 and 42,400. Now, when you look at all across the state, we know that in the population of our state now is moving toward the center. And the courts say that any county that does not have enough population to make a whole district, which is at least 38,400, cannot be divided. It must remain whole. So those counties that do not have that much have to move into, the representatives of those counties have to move into a county that has more than what would be an ideal district. Well, Franklin County now, according to the 2000 census, has a little over 47,000, whereas in the 1990 census we had a little over 43,000. All right, Franklin County is one of 23 counties in the state out of the 120 that has more than the ideal number. So now if you can get in your mind a picture of this, with the population moving toward the center of our state, and you have all the counties and smaller counties in the west, and each representative is supposed to represent at least at the minimum of 38,400 people, there's going to be some shifting around of borders. Now, at the present time, our county, we have representation, in addition to myself, we have Jack Coleman, who represents Anderson and Mercer. He has one precinct on the south end, Green Wilson. Joe Barrows has, from Wilkes County, he has about 8 precincts in our county. All right, now, according to this latest census, Jack will be able to have a whole district with Anderson and Mercer, because together they're around 39,000 population. So hopefully we're going to get back Green Wilson into our county, into our district, which is 57th. Now, but here's the other things going to be considered. Shelby County, who joins us, has 33,000. Not enough for a full district. The county they had been with before, Spencer, if they take that one, it's smaller than Shelby, but it'll make it more than the whole district, so they can't go that way. Only way Shelby County can go now to make a complete district is going to be go into Jefferson, go into Oldham, or come into Franklin. I don't know if it will, but I'm saying that's these things that you start looking at. And then Joe Barrows, Woodford County, 23,000 people. So he has about 9,000 right now in Franklin County. He has some in Fayette County. So but how all this jockeys out, we don't really know. But this redistricting is very important. It's important is the people who like in the House, we have 66 Democrats, 34 Republicans. In the Senate, you have 20 Republicans, 18 Democrats. The Senate, they get to draw their boundaries. The House will draw their boundaries, and then you've got to come to agree, and people agree. Now, what I'm saying is, if we go into session and this is not done, these things are going to, I just feel it's going to be a factor in how the session operates. Another thing is I just mentioned that the Senate and the House, as you well know, is one under leadership of the Republican Party, one under the Democrat in the House. And because of this, during this interim period in the committees, Frank has mentioned that among some of which I serve, for several months there, we did not have interim committee meetings because of the jockeying back and forth between the leaderships and that makes up what is called the Legislative Research Commission, who has to approve all of our meetings. However, we are meeting now, and we have had some of these. And then another factor, I think, that playing the dynamics of this whole session will be the election year of 2003, when we have the gubernatorial elections. And I say that simply because people, you don't know who's seated there on the chamber floors who have ambitions to be other things. And that may or may not factor into maybe how some decision being made. But with that being said, now, and also mention to you that we have had some committee meetings, even though we didn't meet for several months. I'm going to spend the rest of my time, you stay with me if you will, I'm going to go sort of fast and just touch on several things that some of the committees have been discussing. There'll be many more than what I'm going to mention here. And some of these things I mentioned may not ever be addressed entirely, but these will be some things. I want to also state to you that in the sessions that I've been in the General Assembly, in the even number of year sessions, we've had between 1,300 and 1,400 bills introduced each time. And so that's a lot of legislation to be introduced. Now, out of this, we have somewhere between 350 around to 400 bills that will ultimately come into law. So, but with this idea, if we can anticipate maybe another 1,300 or so bills may be introduced while we're in session. So I'm going to just mention a few things here. Now, in the area of agriculture, and that is a big area now because, you know, we've had what was called House Bill 611, which was the tobacco settlement monies, and how we're going to utilize the tobacco settlement money. And that is a pot of monies, about 180 million, I believe it is now, that there's a statewide committee has oversight over. You know, these funds are to help to people who own the land and also who grew the crops and try to maintain and keep a farming presence in our state. We know that some of this money was taken this time from the early childhood, in the last few months, from the early childhood, we had about $10 million in place to help to meet one of the shortfalls we had. $10 million went into this Kentucky Excess, which is the high cost of insurance for people who have illnesses that's difficult to get insurance coverage for. The large farms that have these feeding operations, hogs and chickens, this has been coming up since I've been there. And they try to get the Natural Resources Environmental Protection Cabinet will come up forth with some regulations regarding setbacks and things for people in the areas because of odors and things, unhealthy conditions. And so then they'll set these regulations in effect. Then if the General Assembly doesn't pass them, then they expire at the end of the next General Session, Assembly of the General Session, which has been happening. And the governor is contesting it in the courts now. It's whether or not we can do that. But this is an area that's going to continue to be looked at because of the environmentalists and people who do not like these operations around them. And so this will be touched upon. The thoroughbred industry is concerned. They've had some problems, And, you know, we had those young foals dying last spring. The thoroughbred industry is so critical to our economy in Kentucky. And there was a meeting about 2 weeks ago in Lexington where the people from the thoroughbred community was talking to the Central Kentucky Caucus about the need for them also need help. Now, in today's paper, you may have seen something about the casino gambling. There's been this group of people that, at the racetracks, are concerned about crowds going down and they're losing some of the gambling money, they say, to the casinos. That's along our borders in the Ohio and Kentucky rivers in Mississippi. But there's about 6 casinos, 5 in Indiana and 1 in Illinois, that really had greater impact. The one down in Missouri someplace hasn't had that much impact, they claim. And we've gotten reports on a couple of different committees I'm on about how this casino gambling is taking money away from Kentucky. There was a study in 1999 that stated that Kentuckians spent, and this was prior to the last casino opening, one's open since 1999, that Kentuckians spent $398 million at these casinos. And then that also said that the states of Indiana and Illinois received like $75 million as a result of admissions and gambling taxes or whatever. It said that, you know, the other flip side of that, it said that Kentuckians received salaries, I guess, working in these casinos and things, something like $47 million. And then Kentucky businesses had about $119 million from providing services and supplies. Then the ultimate effect stated that Kentucky lost about $298 million that could have been coming to Kentucky, that we had something like 3,550 jobs that could have been here in Kentucky. And so the bottom line is that if we're going to find some people, we're going to be pushing for casino gambling in our state. That in today's paper, I had these comments prepared before I read today's paper, then I read today's paper, and I see that that was pretty much there. Now, pertaining to state government and state employees, the governor put into effect an executive order the last few months pertaining to state employees that would allow state employees to vote whether or not they would like to have union representation to come to a board or a committee that would advise the governor on the employees' salaries, fringe benefits, and things of this nature. He divided the state employees into 9 different groups, and within those 9 groups, you could have these elections. It didn't take many people, I can't remember the exact percentage, in those various 9 categories that had to vote on the affirmative to have representation to make it a vote happen. And then a smaller percentage was able to bring that into existence. So I think we have the corrections officers maybe have voted that in, and maybe some, I don't know, some of the healthcare workers or social workers or not, but they claim there's going to be 3 or 4 elections between now and the time of going into session. Well, that, of course, plays a big thing. That's an important issue here in this county. Some of you, if you grew up here in this county, as I did, can remember back prior to the merit system. You know, our merit system went into effect, and I believe around 1960 under Governor Combs. As I recall, when Governor Chandler was in, he had a study, he made the Jacob study or something, look at state government, and it was recommended the state government should have a civil service force. And so then, I believe Governor Combs came in, he implemented this, and so we've had the merit system. And also as part of personnel law, in statute, it says state employees are supposed to get a 5% raise annually. Of course, the budget bill supersedes all that. If money's not there, you don't get the 5%. They could get more, but at least it's 5%. And over the years, I remember back in the 70s, sometimes we didn't get 1 year nothing, and 1 year 2%, 1 year 3%, and inflation was high, and so employees lost money, status there. But then in more recent years, under Governor Patton, every year he's been there, he's promoted a 5% raise, in which we've gotten that, and the cost of living has been less, so state employees have come up some. But so there's a lot of feeling among state employees that I get. And by the way, as you understand, I represent more state employees than any individual representative does. And since I've been in this position, I have only had 2 employees talk to me about they would like to have union representation. And that's all I've had. I'm sure there has to be some others out there, but I've had numerous employees oppose that. They do not want it. They fear it. They fear that, and I've talked to some members of the General Assembly. They say, well, you can't have both things. You can't have both things. You can't have union representation or in dealing in this, and then also have the merit system. So it seems incompatible. And so, but that's an issue that's going to be there. Of course, health insurance is a terrible thing. The cost of health insurance and the drug costs. And so we have a person now in the insurance department that's just supposed to be working with that, and we have a person over in the personnel department that's working, specializing in trying to get self-insurance issues. So this is going to continue to be an issue. I went in at 95, after the 1994 health care reform, which everybody's latest claim that started things and went downhill. But I've also found by going to national meetings that this is an issue that all states are facing. And the health care costs are rising between 11 and 14% on an annual basis. So we'll continue to attack these areas. For state employees, there's some possibility that we look in maybe a self-insurance plan again, like they had like Kentucky Care we used to have, which went sort of bankrupt after we had the health care reform and opened it up to all people and took the high-risk people into that. But there's been more statistics have been gathered as to what it would take to make a self-insurance plan work. And that's going to be given some attention. Just for your information, in our state, 15% of the population does not have insurance at all. And some of these people have jobs, they just can't afford to buy the insurance. About 12% of our population has Medicare, and 11% has Medicaid. 4% has some like individual coverage on their own. Then the other 59% has it through their employer. So, but this is a real issue. Now, in the fields of education, the governor has often said on numerous occasions the most important points of his administration always education, 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 and he has lived up to that. He has been a strong education governor. And we know prior to his coming into office, we had the education reform for elementary and secondary, and there have been lots of changes made since 1990 in this thing of, as I mentioned a while ago, lifelong learning. 26 years ago when I came before you, we talked about lifelong learning. That was not a word that you heard too often. But now we understand all across our country that lifelong learning is essential. It has to be. And that means we know people going to workforce will change occupations from 4 to 7 times in the lifespan, or maybe more. And so there has to be re-education of things. And I'm so pleased that I've had a chance to serve in the General Assembly when we had higher education reform and adult education reform. And I'm glad I've had a chance to be there to help to support and keep some of the elementary, secondary education reform. I think it's critical to our well-being as a state and our country. A child can be born in any county in the state of Kentucky today, and if it wants to stay and live in that same little region, they can do so and have good educational opportunities all their life. By putting together the Kentucky Community Technical College system as part of the higher education reform, we have infrastructure. We have the 8 public universities. We have these like about 29 of these community technical colleges. And that's where the bulk of our post-secondary is going to be going into this area. And then we have, with our technology that we're having now, we have what you call virtual universities and virtual high schools. If you look in today's paper, I don't know which one it is, Courier Journal or Lexington Herald, but it shows 3 Frankfort High students taking a class, advanced class, for advanced placement over like TV, things of this nature. And we have what is now called a virtual high school. High school students can take advanced courses that they couldn't afford to have right in their small classes, small schools. And we have virtual university now. You can take university courses. So we have an infrastructure in our state in which we should always be proud. We've got to, I worked for a year after out of high school at Old Granddad Distillery. I worked in the warehouse. And one of the things I did in the warehouse then has reminded me so often as I work in the General Assembly about what needs to be done. You know, we'd put that whiskey into those barrels. Then they had to be rolled to the warehouse. And they were heavy barrels. You had these runs. But the person, it took the hardest push had to be made by the one that got it started, and then they would give it a roll and a kick, and would start the barrel rolling to the warehouse. Along the tracks, people would be stationed, and the barrel would come to you, it's rolling, so we just take it and give it a turn or just a little tap and keep it going. And I think about that when I think about some of the things we've instituted here in Kentucky that are good in trying to raise our level of our economy. And we've got something going, and so try to keep it going. Keep the momentum moving. It's going to be tough with the budget so far, but this is going to be critical. Teachers' salaries, that's a top item. We've had a subcommittee working on that during the interim. We know teachers' salaries need to be raised. We're having a shortage of teachers, and teachers are working harder than they ever did before on the reform. They've been in hours. They have to get better training, more training, different types of training. And so we try to raise that. Harry Mobley, chairman of the Revenue and Appropriations Committee, wants this to happen. If Harry wants it to happen, it has a better chance of happening because of his position. But it's right. It does need to get this up. Classified workers needed also. I'll move on quickly. In labor and industry, workers' compensation is going to come back again, particularly in the area of black lung. We passed some legislation about 4 years ago that cut back on the cost of workers' compensation and people who are receiving black lung benefits. And so there's been many meetings across the state. And the testimony seems to indicate that perhaps they may have gone too far. Maybe there needs to be some adjustment to some of these people that have black lung. So that'll be revisited again. Telemarketing is going to come back again. That's one of the most popular bills we had last time in session, was to put your name on a no-call list and keep these calls from coming in. It passed out of the House with no opposition, but it died. With the Senate, they adjusted it so much and changed it, watered it down, that when it came back to the House, the sponsor of the bill said it wasn't worth it, so he just dropped it, and we'll bring it back again. And the Transportation Committee has been looking at this primary seatbelt law. You've been reading something about that recently. You know, presently you cannot be, if you don't have your seatbelt on, you cannot be stopped as a primary offense of not having your seatbelt on. But they can stop you from other things, and if you don't have a seatbelt on, then you can be fined or whatever. But many states now have not wearing a seatbelt as a primary offense. And so there's going to be some promotion pushing to pass that legislation. Cell phone bill. There's going to be some legislation to try to say you cannot use a cell phone while you're driving your automobile. That's going to be, may or may not get out of a Transportation Committee. The committee chairman of the Transportation Committee doesn't like that bill. But I don't know, but that's still there. Today's session over at the courthouse reminded me of one. I've been asked to look at this also, maybe help to sponsor, but it's been this piece has been sponsored and sent already, is like a Purple Heart Trail. Back in Virginia a few years ago, people with the Purple Heart Society or a group wanted to have a trail of highways throughout the United States that people could track, that and you have places that where maybe people were born, like where George Washington was born, whatever, but have trails or highways that's going by sites like that. And we don't have one in Kentucky yet, but it's in Virginia, going down North Carolina, South Carolina. So they'd like to get it expanded this way, and there's going to be legislation to bring it at least from when you come in around Ashland on I-64 to at least Louisville. Pardon me? How is that determined? It would be determined by the General Assembly. The bill itself will state where the trail would be, and then if it passes the General Assembly. Then in the area of economic development, we've had a new economy initiative with technology, which I referred to a while ago, all these things. We're trying to keep that going, keep our technology developing. We are very fortunate that in our public schools, our public schools are wired as well as any public schools in any state in the country. And so we got to keep this going. There's a support for this economic opportunity zones, which are areas of our state that are called economically challenged, and try to have some monies available to help in regionally to get some economy started. We have had the Kentucky Innovative Act, which helps to have more research and development, particularly when focusing on University of Kentucky, University of Louisville. And the person that has been brought into state government now works out under the governor. And just in the last few months, I can't think of his name right now, but he came here, I believe, from Kansas or somewhere in the Midwest. And I've heard his presentation, and he said we're going to have technology zones in our state, which is going to be by bringing together entrepreneurs and universities, and try and have some fund matching and venture capital. Now, pertaining to elections, also in today's paper, I saw where that they're still debating about who won the election for the president. It's written about in there again today. And so there's been a lot of talk about election reform. So I'm just going to mention a few things that I think I took my piece of paper. I put that way too fast. Some of the things that you're going to see come through the General Assembly regarding elections. Now, by the way, I want to say we're really well off in our state, returning to people when to go in and cast their votes. We only have 11 counties that do not have electronic voting. It's pretty good. And down in Florida, that's supposed to be a state. They've been pushing those things, but we're doing really well. So we're not likely to have the kind of problems that they had in Florida. Now, there will be legislation to move the May primary up 1 week earlier, to miss Memorial Day. Those people who move out of our state to another state right before a presidential election, where they wouldn't be able to establish residence, will be able to vote in the state here in Kentucky. So they will at least be able to get their vote counted. We now have a primary runoff that we passed back 3 or 4 years ago for gubernatorial candidates. If you didn't get 50% of the vote or what it was, you had to have a primary runoff. And so there's going to be legislation to abolish that. They're going to raise the poll workers' salary from $60 to $100. And people, when you go to the polls, you have to really have some identification to make sure you really who you are, and you show that. And then also be a legislation to allow the governor to change the date of the election in an emergency. For instance, like what we had on September of the 11th, if that had been an election day or whatever, or something there, that the governor can change things. On the judiciary, I'm hurrying. Okay. On the judiciary, you're going to see a lot about abolishing the death penalty. There's been several articles in papers recently about that, and we've been getting a lot of information sent to all of us about this. And then there's a second, abolish the death penalty per se. Then there's going to be a separate legislation. We'll abolish the death penalty for those who committed this crime before under the age of 18. Two different sets of legislation. Then also there's concern about use of the DNA. We know now that so many mysteries have been solved because of use of DNA. So the state police will be requesting $5 million in the next budget to be able to utilize the DNA. And there's going to be a review of the, and perhaps alter the child support guidelines. One of the issues that's really been at the forefront in the last couple of years are the people who are really concerned about the child support guidelines. You find many fathers who are concerned about this, and who'd also like to help, have care of the children, and they think guidelines don't really relate to them as well as they should. So there'll be some look at that. Now, in health and welfare, we know that Medicaid had a big shortfall. We start with about $250 million deficit, $80 million deficit. And there's going to be more emphasis on managed care to try to lower the cost of Medicaid. And then also, there's going to be fewer drugs allowed to be prescribed, that the high-costing drugs. And at the present time, physicians can write prescriptions for about any kind of drugs that's maybe that's not on the formulary, it's run the cost up. So there's going to be a board, a committee, a group that has oversight over this to make sure that people are getting the drugs that they need, but not always at the most high cost. In mental health, last budget we put together in 2000, we budgeted $50 million for mental health, and there's still 17,000 people who need services. And then when the governor was trying to adjust some of the early shortfalls, some money was taken from this too. So this is a critical area. Long-term care is also a big issue. Those of us that are looking around us, we all concerned about that. And we know that we have adequate number of beds, we're told, for long-term care, but there's a lacking of, once again, of monies for that. Need money. And then last week I attended a meeting in Lexington of Kentuckians for Quality of Life, KQOL. It's a group representing a lot of senior citizens groups. And they're pushing for emphasis on supportive living. And so maybe a change of how monies flow. People who are on welfare, as a result of welfare reform, have a maximum of 60 months which they could be on welfare. Now, some had made that limit of 60 months, and still some are still need additional help. And so that's a concern that's going to be requested for that. The people that in the Health and Welfare Committee say that we need $70 million new dollars just to have a continuation budget. And then on top of that 70 million, they say they're going to be requesting 25 additional million above the continuation. And we've already had to have some cuts from that to make up for the shortfall. So you see that's going to be a real touchy issue. Now in natural resources, solid waste is going to come back again. This county, and all my polls, surveys and things, and going around people in Franklin County, you want me to vote for this legislation, and I have done so every time. And there's some of the things to try to do is, and some don't feel is fair, but is to have like a 0.5% tax on beverage containers in these wrappers and things that you get on fast food to help pay for cleanup of our roadsides and waterways. There was also, last year, we had the big rolling blackouts in California. Loss of power. We didn't have enough power. Kentucky has coal and natural gas reserves. And so there's been 24 permits granted for developing 24 of these plants that would, most of them would be merchant plants that would sell their power outside the borders of Kentucky. Then there were additional, those have been approved. There was several additional permit requests made, and the governor put a moratorium on those to hold it until we had a chance to look and to make a study of the present 24 that's been approved. And so there's people concerned about the cost of power and using of our resources and the environmental concerns. So this is going to be an area that will be touched. Now, on the military public safety, we've had people that's responsible for our protection here in the state come before one of our committees, Program Review and Investigation Committee, and also before the Senior Military Affairs Committee, to see how Kentucky is doing in preparedness for this terrorism and things of this nature. And we're told that they're doing quite well. We've got a good system set up, and they feel really well that we are at least been alerted. And you'll notice now if you're going to go into the Capitol, you're going to have to go and sign in and show your picture. So they're working on that. The non-U.S., just another legislation, is that a non-U.S. citizen will not be able to get a Kentucky driver's license. And many people feel it's real critical that people who are not U.S. citizens now sometimes can get a driver's license easier than people who are citizens of the state. And so there's going to be legislation to stop that. There's also, we know that any 18 to 24-year-old male is supposed to be registered for selective service. Kentucky only has about somewhere in the 70% of those who really have registered for selective service. Well, since the big issue on September the 11th, it's been called more attention. And so Kentucky is 46 of the 50 states in those who have registered for selective service. So as part of that, legislation will be introduced that when a person gets their driver's license, it'll be somewhere on there that signs their approval that they will be automatically, if they're in this age group, registered for selective service. Another thing is coming before our committee was the prisoner of war MIA flag that you see flown around. It's over at the courthouse today. There's some want it to be flown on a daily basis up at the Vietnam Memorial. There's those who say it should not be, and those don't think it's appropriate to be flown every day. And the Vietnam Memorial is operated by a board. The property was Kentucky property, but the board has oversight of this memorial. And they want to just fly the flag on special occasions, like they do in Washington. There's a certain day of the year that they fly it, and then on to other special occasions. And they claim it helps to give better recognition, and the fact that we got a group, we have spent about $100 million, federal government is, ongoing basis, trying to find people who are missing in all the wars. And so they claim it shouldn't be flown all the time. So that's going to be a little, emotional issue that come before. We're going to have 2 new veterans hospitals, and then public advocacy needs more money. And I'm about finished. I'm about time to run away. Now, Wendell Butler, y'all remember Wendell Butler? I mean, I always enjoy talking to him. He has so many clever little statements. Now, I've talked here, quite a bit, touched a lot of topics, but I remember one of the things that Wendell used to say. He said, after all is said and done, there'll be more said than done. So I don't know what's going to come out of this, but thank you for letting me be with you. And,
Any questions? Anybody got any questions? Well,
Glad to hear
Thank you.
how the districts were divided, because I've been hearing about it for years, but had no idea
yeah.
of why they had to do all of this manipulation.
it is not an easy task.
It sounds like
It really is not. I mean, you can go in and, for instance, I could go in and say, I want to keep exactly the district I have right now, plus I want Green Wilson. And I may get that, but a lot of it's going to depend on what happens in Shelby County. And a lot of it's going to, and which way they're going to be able to go, and if they're going to go in Oldham, they're going to go in Jefferson. And then same thing with Joe Barrows over in Woodford County, and how they go. He got a little bit in Fayette now. Does Fayette need to have another district there, and him come pull back this way and take more here? You just don't know. So that's some of the things. Listen, thank you so much.
Oh, and thank you. We usually have a gift for our speaker, but you passed a law that says you can't do that. So, but if you want to stay, and we'll be glad to feed you.
I had lunch over at the Veterans Fair, VFW, after the session at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Every year they go over to the VFW and you get chili and sandwich and chips and visits. So that's where I came from. So thank you very
Our
much.
food's better.
Yes. Well, thank you all.
But thank you, and Rose Gale will see you out.